For the first time ever, a Kennedy has lost a political race in Massachusetts, and it comes at the hands of a progressive Democrat. Senator Ed Markey defeated Joseph Kennedy III in the state's Democratic primary for Senate last night. Markey had the backing of progressive AOC, while Kennedy, on the other hand, who's the grandson of Robert Kennedy and the great nephew of JFK, was endorsed by Nancy Pelosi and other establishment Dems. So, is this more evidence that the Democratic Party is moving further and further to the left? Let's ask our company, political analyst Mark Halperin and RNC member Bruce Hough. Hi, guys. Great to see you. So
Hi,
this is interesting to me, Bruce, because essentially you've got this matchup that is AOC and Pelosi. So I'm wondering, what can we glean from this headed into November? What are the implications of this? But then I'm also wondering the bigger question that I think a lot of people are asking. Is this the end of the Kennedy dynasty?
Well, it's not quite the end of the Kennedy dynasty because his cousin Amy is running for Congress in New Jersey. But I think this is pretty fascinating. I think there was a great underestimate by the Kennedy folks who thought this would be maybe a good pickoff because Markey's 74 years old. He kind of had a sleepwalk through his last campaigns. And they underestimated him, and they underestimated the power of how left I think Massachusetts has become. This is crazy to see one progressive trying to take on another progressive, and the one out progressive the other.
Yeah, it's interesting because Kennedy was he's the poster child of what you would think of for winning that seat. Now, in talking about going forward to the elections, do you think this is a trend that's going to continue, the further and further push to the left, Mark?
Well, look, Kennedy's pretty far to the left. I think you're right to identify AOC as a big part of it. Kennedy didn't really push his name, but I think if you walk around Massachusetts, you find a lot of people, younger people, who don't really care about the Kennedys. I don't want to insult their knowledge of history, but they probably don't have a full appreciation of what the Kennedys have done within the Democratic Party. I think it shows AOC's power. I also think it shows it's hard to beat incumbents. Ed Markey did not run. He ran a little bit scared. He ran hard, and he had support from large parts of the party. And finally, on the Kennedy name, Kennedy himself didn't really push it until the end. And I think if he'd played up the Kennedy name more early on, he might have done better if he'd been able to educate people about what the Kennedys have done in the state.
And maybe the Pelosi endorsement didn't do much for him. And speaking of Pelosi, the speaker is getting blasted today for some video that was released of her in a hair salon without a mask on. In fact, the salon owner tweeting out that it was a slap in the face that she went in, that she feels that she can just go and get her stuff done while no one else can go in and I can't get work. Now, that was actually a statement of that salon owner to Fox News. Now, it seems like a lot of elected officials are really showing contempt for the rights of average Americans, saying the rules don't apply to us in the same way that it applies to you. And I'm just wondering, Mark, how many people out there are looking at this video of Pelosi today and feeling the same way, ones who would normally vote Democrat?
Look, I think it's horrible, and I don't like to turn everything into a media story, but the coverage of this, I think, has been extraordinarily pro-Pelosi. The Associated Press story was not about what she did, but about the fact that she was being attacked for it. I think the president deserves a lot of responsibility for the failure to educate people on masks. But here you have Nancy Pelosi caught on tape, not just not wearing a mask, but potentially going into an establishment that should not have been open. And I don't see Democrats being pressed about it. I think people so far seem to have bought her explanation through her staff. So I think this deserves a lot of scrutiny.
And speaking of that explanation, here was her response. This is a statement she put out. The speaker always wears a mask and complies with local COVID requirements. This business offered for the speaker to come in on Monday and told her they were allowed by the city to have one customer at a time in the business. But Bruce, she wasn't wearing a mask.
Look, this is the problem. I think we are really facing a problem between what really has become an elite political group in Washington, and it kind of harkens back to the '93 Clinton haircut. They're just out of touch, and her friend Governor Newsom He's the one that's basically shut down businesses in California. By the way, Sean, you may notice I have a haircut that I didn't have just 3 or 4 days ago when I saw you before. How could that happen possibly in this pandemic? Well, it happens because service industries can actually operate in the pandemic if they follow CDC guidelines. But for some reason, Utah has that message, but California hasn't figured that out yet. And so salon owners and service establishments like this woman's in California can't operate and make a living. And yet, for some reason, we can have, Nancy Pelosi waltz in and get it done. So this is a failure of leadership in the sense that we have people who are not really walking their talk. And people, I think, are tired of being disrespected by the fact that they're smart enough to know how they can operate their business following CDC guidelines, and the government's going to tell them they just can't do it. And I think that's the problem.
I just think the thing, Bruce, that I found in the whole episode wasn't, I agree with you. I've got my hair cut a couple times now. You go in, you put the mask on, the person's wearing their mask, everything works nice. I agree with you 100%. The thing that I find fascinating is that it's the hypocrisy, right? So it's these folks on the left who preach to everybody about how they should behave and then go out there and run counter to it and believe that the laws and the mandates and the issues don't apply to them. And that's where I think, we talk about the mixed messages. That's part of it. Mark, one of the other things, if I can jump back to a moment to the Kennedy-Markey race. Markey, in an interview a while ago, made a quote that got tweeted out again last night to some extent. He took the old Kennedy quote, which was, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And he said, it's about time that your country started asking what it can do for you. Emerald asked at the beginning of the thing, the question I have is, that really flips on its head what the Democratic Party, and frankly, both parties have been about for a while, which is how we can all come together to make the country a better place. And now it seems as though the narrative is, what can the country be doing for you? Do you think that that's just a one-off quote, or is there a shift in that with the party on the Dem side?
Oh, Sean, the Democratic Party has shifted so far to the left since Barack Obama left office. You see it in Joe Biden. He was part of an administration that was, I would say, center left, and now is espousing positions that are pretty far to the left. And they're going into this election not hiding from that on almost every issue. They're proudly saying that change dynamic. The government is here to help you. We're not asking you to contribute to the government. They'll win or lose this election, I'm quite certain, on whether the American people prefer that type of governance to what they have now.
Well, I have to say, Mark and Bruce, one thing you don't necessarily want to get between is a lady and her hairstylist, especially if she's got that gray coming in. I would know. All right. Our nation's veterans' ongoing struggle with depression has been well documented, but the coronavirus pandemic has added another challenge for our heroes. More on that when we return.